Welcome back to another installment in my Top 100 Players series. Today, we'll be ranking players 71 through 80. If you want to view the two videos I dropped before this, which goes over players 81 through 100, there is a playlist link down in the description box below so you can watch these in order. We're starting at 100 and working our way to number 1. As I've said in previous videos, this is a predictive ranking system. This is rankings heading into next season and how I think players will perform next year. Leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're new, and without further ado, let's jump into the rankings. At 80, I have Indiana Pacers wing Caris Levert. He's a guy who I've always been kind of split on during his time in Brooklyn and now during his time in Indiana. He's a guy that's been a bit injury prone over his career, so that knocks him down a little bit in my eyes. If you look at his points per game and assists per game, rebounds per game, it's impressive. He's a 6'6", 6'7" wing that can play make, get 5 assists per game. He can score on all 3 levels. However, the knock for me is he doesn't score efficiently enough to justify the number of shots that he takes. Now, he is a candidate for a guy whose efficiency could take a jump this year. I wouldn't be shocked to see him get up to around 46-47% from the field and 36% from 3. That doesn't seem like a huge difference, but in the long run, it would make his scoring much more productive for the team. His defense is also subpar, so just the lack of efficiency and defensive issues from Caris Levert have him coming in at number 80. However, he's one of those guys that is pretty close to jumping up a bit. It would just take him being more efficient and improving on the defensive end. If he could do that, he could potentially be a top 50 player. And the Indiana Pacers, after an offseason where they barely did anything, are likely counting on him to make that sort of jump. At 79, I have Kevin Porter Jr. from the Houston Rockets, who had a very impressive season last year. He averaged almost 17 points per game and over 6 assists. Now, this was for a very bad Rockets team, and he only played 26 games, so it remains to be seen how well utilizing him in the role that he played last year for the Rockets can contribute to winning. And it also remains to be seen whether or not he can do what he did consistently over an entire 82-game season. But last year, for him, it was all about him breaking out is kind of a facilitator and a point forward type of player. Now he has Jalen Green as a teammate, he has Alperen Sengun, so you have some interesting players there next to him in Houston, and it will be really interesting to watch the Houston Rockets next season just to see how all those pieces fit. But just like Levert, Porter has to improve his efficiency and his defense. At 78, I have TJ Warren, another Indiana Pacers player who only played 4 games last year before missing the rest of the season with an injury. Now, I made this rankings list before I found out that TJ Warren is likely not going to play anytime soon, so he could be out for a good portion of next year. If I knew that, I probably would have taken him off this list. However, he comes in here at 78. These stats are not from last year, but the previous season back in 2019-2020. In that season, he averaged 20 points per game and did it efficiently, 54% from the field, 40% from 3, 61 true shooting. He is a stretch 4 who can play okay defense. He's not great on that end, but I wouldn't say he's bad. And he's a guy that can just come in and get you a bucket. During the bubble back in that season, he went on a tear. He had a 50-point game. He looked phenomenal. His best role in today's NBA might be a 6th Man of the Year candidate as a backup 4, much like Danilo Gallinari for the Atlanta Hawks. But he is good enough to be a starter on a good team like we've seen in previous years for the Indiana Pacers, so therefore he comes in at 78. At 77, we have our first rookie, and that is Jalen Suggs of the Orlando Magic. Now, I will say I am a Gonzaga fan, and most of you know that. So there's probably some of you in the comment section saying, you're biased, Jalen Suggs is not going to be the 77th best player in the league next year. However, he impressed me during the bubble. His jump shot looked better during the bubble than it did last season for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. And I think that's the one key for him having a good rookie season. If he's able to knock down jump shots, he comes in the top 80 in my opinion, because he's going to be a good defender right off the bat. He's going to be a good playmaker right off the bat. His court vision is something that you can't really teach. He was a quarterback in high school and actually had some D1 attention as a quarterback, so he's a guy that knows how to pass a ball. He's going to be given the keys to the Orlando offense right away, so he's going to to be allowed to make some mistakes and then try and grow from them. I think he's going to be a good player right off the bat, and I have him coming in right here at 77. At 76, I have another point guard. That is Kemba Walker, now of the New York Knicks. This past offseason, he got traded from the Celtics to the Oklahoma City Thunder. He then got bought out and signed with the New York Knicks, which I think is a good destination for him. Now, a lot of people act like Kemba Walker sucks now, and I feel like that's because his contract was so bad. He was definitely overpaid, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't still a serviceable or even a good player, and I think he's a good player. That's why I have him here at 76. Last season averaged almost 20 points per game, averaged 5 assists per game, shot 42% from the field, 36% from 3. Now this came in only 31 minutes per game. Per 36, he was averaging 22 points per game, and it was efficient enough that he's still a good scorer, man. Boston was kind of dysfunctional last season, so I feel like he got the short end of the stick in terms of being the starter that got shipped out to another destination. However, I don't think the blame necessarily lies squarely on him whatsoever, and I think New York's going to be a good destination for him. He has a really good defense around him to make up for some of his potential defensive shortcomings, and then he also has a 4 that can help him with the playmaking duties in Julius Randle and could potentially help him get higher quality shots than he got last year for the Boston Celtics. So I think Kemba Walker is going to have a good season next year for the Knicks, and therefore I have him coming in at 76. At 75, this is probably going to be controversial. I have Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors. I think a lot of people might have him higher than this. I think a few might have him lower. This is a guy that's really hard to rank. He averaged 7 points per game last year, 7 rebounds, 9 assists per game. He's the king of the triple single. The main issue for me with Draymond is just his three-point shooting has fallen off, and he's not a guy that you really have to respect behind the arc as much as you used to when the Golden State Warriors went on those championship runs and Draymond Green was considered an all-star. At this point, he's a really good passer and a really good defensive big man, one of the best defensive players in the league, of course, but beyond that, he doesn't provide much value. He's the type of guy that'll be much more productive if he has a Steph and a Clay around him in a Steve Kerr-led offense. If you went and put him on a mediocre team without those two players and without an offense that isn't set up as well as Golden State's is, then he would probably be a fringe top 100 player in my opinion. In the end, this decline in ranking from where he was during those championship runs is directly tied to his decline in offensive production outside of passing the basketball. Let me know where you think a good spot for Draymond Green would be down in the comment section below. Let me know if you agree with this ranking. Let me know if you have him higher. Let me know if you'd actually have him a little bit lower. I'm curious to see what the thoughts are on Draymond Green. At 74, I have Miles Turner, yet another Indiana Pacer, and this just kind of goes to my point that I've made all offseason, that Indiana has a lot of solid role players, but they don't have enough top-end talent, top-end being top 30, top 40, top 50 talent. So this is the third guy in this video. Miles Turner is one of the best rim protectors in the league, averaged a league-leading 3.4 blocks per game, can also stretch the floor a little bit, 34% from 3, 60% true shooting percentage. He is a 3-and-D center that doesn't really provide much else. He's not a good rebounder for a center, only averaging 6.5 rebounds per game. He would be higher on this list if he was more efficient from the three-point line, but at only 34%, he's good enough to draw defenders out of the paint, but not good enough that he's really going to make them pay on a consistent basis. It's also a weird fit with him and Domantas Sabonis there in Indiana. Both those guys are centers in my opinion, and they got Sabonis playing the 4. I think Indiana should have traded one of those two guys this past offseason, but they didn't, so we'll see if they're able to make something different happen next year, but I'm not really counting on it. I think they'll be a back-end playoff team, and then they won't make it out of the first round, and then we'll have the same conversations we did this past offseason next offseason. At 73, I have Mike Conley of the Utah Jazz, who had a good bounce-back season after struggling the year prior. He averaged 16 points per game, 6 assists, shot 44% from the field, 41% from 3. He finally made the All-Star team. He's always been a guy who's been on the cusp of being an All-Star in previous seasons. He finally made the All-Star team. Now, he was an injury replacement, so he didn't make it outright, but still, it was good to see Mike Conley finally get an All-Star nod. Now, he's getting up there in age. He's almost 34 years old, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him take a little bit of a step back in terms of production. However, he's still going to be a guy who can defend well, can play make, and can knock down some shots. He also still has one of of the best floaters in the NBA, so he's kind of a guy that is a good all-around player at this point and a really good complementary piece for the Utah Jazz. At 72, this one is probably also going to be controversial. Collin Sexton of the Cleveland Cavaliers falls in at this spot. Now, he is the highest point per game scorer so far on this top 100 players series list, 24.3 points per game. I'm just going to go into why I don't have a guy like him higher, a guy who averaged 24 points per game on decent percentages. For me, he's averaging good numbers on a bad team. He's not a good playmaker. There's been rumblings about teammates not feeling good about him and feeling like he's a selfish player. You cannot have that out of a 6'1" guard who has the ball a lot. If your leading scorer is making other players feel disenfranchised, then I got an issue with that. Now, he did average 4.4 assists per game, so that's not terrible, but I'm just going based off of reports about the Cleveland Cavaliers organization and their locker room. I think at this point in his career, he's best served as a sixth man if he's playing on a good team. He's one of those guys that I could see averaging 16, 17 points per game as a sixth man of the year candidate, but on a bad team, he's a guy that can get you 24. So overall, he's a hard player to find a spot for. I have him here at 72. Let me know where you would rank him or what range you would have him in and what you think about me ranking him here at 72. And at 71, I have Jaren Jackson Jr., who did not have a good year last year. He was injured. He came back a bit later than people expected, and he struggled to find a rhythm. However, the season before that, he averaged over 17 points per game and only 28 minutes per game. And he shot 47% from the field and 39% from three, so it was an efficient 17 points per game. Extrapolate that over per 36, and he averaged 22 points per game back in 2019-2020. And that was only his second year. He's still a very young player. He turns 22 years old a week from now. So I'm expecting a bounce back season for him. Hopefully for him, he's able to stay healthy and build upon what he showed 2 seasons ago. I do expect that to happen. I do expect him to step back up into that number 2 role behind Ja Morant. And then on top of that, he's been a pretty solid defensive player. He's athletic, he's a good shot blocker, and he can move his feet out on the perimeter, so he can play some 5, he can play some 4, and he's very solid on that end. So therefore, I got Jaren Jackson Jr. rounding out this video at 71. Anyway, that wraps up this edition of my top 100 players rankings. As I've said in this video, let me know your thoughts on some of these players down in the comment section below. And with that, I'm out of here. Have a good rest of your day. Until next time, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.